What is up? Welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot. You know, sometimes in life, things do not go as planned. For instance, when I scheduled this show, I did not expect Scott Fish to start the slow drafts a week earlier than he normally does. I also didn't expect, obviously, my celebrity guest to not be able to make the show tonight. It's just one of those things. However, the slow drafts are only about 10 rounds in. There's still about 10 live drafts that are still going to need to kick off. So there is still a lot of value in this mock draft. Plus, you get to talk fantasy football with some really cool people. What could be better? We're going to do a Scott Fish Bowl mock again tonight, last one of the season before we get into redraft. Let's get into this draft. I have really got to stop taking a week off in between shows because when I do that, I hit the wrong intro and all sorts of other wonky stuff happens, like one of our guests falling out just as the show is about to start. I know Andrew was on a hotel Wi-Fi, so that's probably what happened. I'm sure he'll jump back in here soon. Welcome, folks, to Mock It Like It's Hot. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. Austin, what a Friday night, my friend.
Yeah, you continue to schedule these mock drafts during baseball on Friday nights. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, Friday night to do another take at the Scott Fish mock, which I'm excited about because now that the actual drafts have started, I actually think this conversation is going to be really helpful because we have some live data to compare what is actually happening in the drafts versus what's happening in the mock drafts. Because if you've been drafting so far, you will learn really quickly it is a very different world once you have the actual scoring projections to the correct scoring system impacting ADP.
Yeah, I that's kind of where I was thinking with this. I'm not going to pretend that I imagined a world where the slow drafts would be this far in already. Like I thought, honestly, I thought everything was going to be starting this upcoming week. I knew the live drafts were starting. I even made a joke that I was worried the draft was going to fill, and I'm going to give a shout out to our guest from 2 weeks ago, Jamie, who jumped in like Superman and filled this mock draft up so quickly. I told Andrew, hopefully he's back here with us shortly, that he's the first guest to ever not actually be in the draft with us because of how everything got weird. I want to give my best to our good friend Mike Stoyanov. I mentioned 2 weeks ago he was going to be joining us tonight. Something came up. He was not going to be able to make the show. It's all love there. We're going to try to have him on for a show later on this summer, but he was not able to make this show. So if I bait and tricked you, that you bait and switched you, that he was going to be here for this show. I do apologize. But like I said, he's not going to be able to make it tonight. Hopefully we get Andrew back in here, but even if we don't, it's going to be a great show. Austin, let's go ahead and get this thing started. So let me go ahead and get the draft up on the screen, do all the things that we do. As I have always mentioned, first and foremost, we do not rank every team. We don't do any of that stuff where we're going to talk about every team. There's too many teams. We're going to hear to talk about the interesting picks, the interesting players. But I do like to start this entire thing by giving a thank you to the 11 people that have chosen to come mock draft with us tonight. We started off at the 101 with Uncle Bottom, Bro Cal, a frequent drafter with us at the 2. 3 is Killas FFB, Dan Birch at 4, Ryan Kirby at 5, Steve O at 6. Jamie is picking from the 7 spot. My good friend Lewis is picking from the 8 spot. Those two were actually on the show together a few weeks ago, and now they're picking back to back again. RDIP picking 9. Austin chose the 10 tonight. Merck at the 11. Merck, if you've never tuned into the show, I am an 11. I draft next week. I will be paying very close attention to your draft if you happen to be watching. And Jay Kaplan is picking from the 12. Sounded like we got Andrew back there. We do. Welcome back, Andrew. Oh, can you hear us? I'm going to put Andrew in the background for a little bit because I don't think we have him back quite yet, but that's okay. We'll get it all figured out here shortly. And Austin, I'm going to go ahead and get this draft started. And as you mentioned, it is really good that we actually have some data to talk about. And that's kind of where I was going to get this thing started. Just a reminder to anybody who's watching the show, this is a 30-second clock, and we will talk about, actually, let's start with Scott Fish Bowl settings, Austin. And the first thing we want to talk about with Scott Fish Bowl settings this year is there are no positions. It is technically a super flex, but it is 9 flex, 2 super flex, and they have done the scoring as such that you don't actually need to have a quarterback in your super flex spot. Otherwise, it's just huge bonuses everywhere. So you're going to see a lot of really weird picks, big tight end bonuses, all of that kind of fun stuff. I'm going to go ahead and try to bring Andrew back in here. Andrew, you got video this time. I think you're back in with us. How you doing, buddy?
Good, good. Hopefully Hilton doesn't fail me again.
Yeah, I was gonna say hotel Wi-Fi is always interesting. Andrew, before we actually get started with this, go ahead and introduce yourself. You've been on the Club Fantasy airwaves sporadically for the last 2 or 3 years. We usually get you on for like NFL drafts and stuff, but you were able to jump in tonight when I needed to fill in after we lost our celebrity guest. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a celebrity in my own right,
hey,
but
I love
not
it.
for maybe the best reasons. No, just kidding. No, yeah, I been part of the Club Fantasy team for a couple years now, just writing a few articles here and there. But um, big, I'm from Minnesota, so a big like Scott Fish supporter. Actually met him
Awesome.
um, in the airport when we were going out to the expo a couple years back. So love Scott, love the community. Obviously, love what the Fishbowl represents. So happy to be here and always love talking ball. So excited to get into it.
Perfect. We're glad to have you. And what I'm going to start is I asked you guys before the draft, and you were both drafting from slow drafts. So I'm going to let you talk about which draft class you're in. And if you guys don't mind, I want you to kind of break down the picks that you've already made in Scott Fishbowl, not this mock draft, but just kind of your first 10 or so picks and kind of what your thought process was there. I don't think there's a better way to get this thing started than to talk about what's already happening. Andrew, if you want to go ahead and get us started, what league are you picking in? What round are you guys in? And talk to me about some of your early picks. Andrew, can you hear me? Oh, he's frozen again. Austin, I'm going to go ahead and let you get us started there. Talk to me about what league you're in, what rounds you guys are in, and what picks you've made so far.
Yeah, so I am in the Carolina Hurricanes League, which is our hockey team, our esteemed hockey team. And I, funny enough, I am not drafting from the actual draft spot that I have in Scott Fish. So I'm drafting from the 10th spot tonight, but I got the first overall pick.
You took 101?
I took 101. And you know what? I decided this year I'm taking 101 because every year I'm like, I'm not going to take 101. I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to think about it a little bit more, kind of strategize and decide, do I want to get the third pick because I want to get this specific player? I didn't do any of that this year. I was just like, screw it. I suck at this league every year. I want to have one year where I feel like decent at it. So I'm going to take the 101, get the best player, my favorite player, and just let it ride from there. So I took Bijan Robinson with my first pick. We are 10 rounds in. I have 4 running backs. Started off, first 4 rounds were all running backs: Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Alvin Kamara, and Chuba Hubbard. And then since then, it's been receiver and quarterback. My 2 quarterbacks right now are Brock Purdy, who I took in the 6th round, Justin Herbert, who I took in the 8th round. And then my receivers around that are Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Juwan Jennings, and Michael Pittman.
Okay. I'm going to have you run through that one more time just because it was a little quick. But I want to start off with Bijan Robinson because I've been putting my Scott Fishbowl rankings out for people who were interested. I've actually been doing it since he announced the scoring. And from that very rip, Bijan Robinson has been my RB1. Now, a lot of folks look at what Jamar Chase did last year, what Saquon Barkley did last year, and they're spending a lot of focus on last year. Why do you think Bijan Robinson is worthy of the first overall pick in this format? And would he also be your first pick in any other fantasy draft this year?
Well, I think first off, he was actually the highest overall scoring player in this format last year. So that always...
I thought Barkley was, but okay. My bad.
Yeah, Bijan Robinson beat him out by 14 points in this specific format. I think largely because Bijan Robinson actually caught more passes last year than Saquon Barkley. So Robinson had 61 catches last year. Barkley only had 33. And in a league where you're getting 2.5 points for every reception, that adds up quickly.
Yeah.
So took Robinson at the 101, and I don't know if I would do it in every league. I think in this format, I'm definitely taking him 101. I think there is probably no better pick at the first overall pick than Bijan Robinson in my mind. In other formats, I think if you're in like a PPR format that doesn't have all these extra bonuses, there's probably a receiver you could take, probably Jamar Chase. I think in best ball formats, there's an argument there for taking someone like Jamar Chase early on. And I think, if I would shy away from Saquon Barkley as the first overall pick in general, just because I think hitting 2,000 yards in back-to-back seasons is so challenging. Yeah. The regression's most likely going to come from him, and I think the Eagles are going to pass more this upcoming year. So I do think in this format, I lean towards Bijan Robinson, but in other formats, I think there's probably some receivers that might squeak up there and overtake Robinson.
Gotcha. And now you mentioned you did take 2 quarterbacks. Did you go into this figuring you needed to take 2 quarterbacks? I have a theory about quarterbacks in this scoring, but did you go into this thinking I need to take 2 quarterbacks because it's super flex, or is it how the board fell to you?
It is truly how the board felt to me. I was not anticipating, I was not going to force quarterback at all. And what I have done throughout my draft is I've just sorted my players based on the projected points that they are expected to score in the scoring system. Because once you get into the actual draft in Scott Fish, you can score by points, projected points in this scoring system. That's not how the mock draft works. The mock draft doesn't do it that way.
The mock draft, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I've mentioned this before. The 2 QB mock draft ADP is awful because it treats every other position like standard scoring. It gives you the 2 QB ADP, which you need, but it treats every other position like standard, which is awful.
Yes. And so because of that, I just went ahead and sorted my players in the actual draft by projected points. And I haven't just taken the highest projected point every time, but I look and see, okay, who is projected to score the most points? And let's use that as my ADP, because ADP is not matching that, because the ADP for the scoring system, like, it's not real. It doesn't exist. It's one draft doing it this year, And so, I've been basing it off of that. And there becomes a point in the draft where, especially if people are not taking quarterbacks, there becomes a point in the draft where quarterbacks suddenly become as valuable or more valuable than players at the other positions. And so for me, that ended up happening in the 6th round with Brock Purdy, where it's like, well, he's projected about the same much as the guys around him, which was Tony Pollard, Devontae Adams, DJ Moore went right around this range. Caleb Williams is right around that range. DK Metcalf. And honestly, like, I don't feel super certain about the Chicago situation with DJ Moore and DK Metcalf in Pittsburgh. So I said, you know what? I think Brock Purdy in San Francisco, they have a chance to bounce back this year. So I went with him in that situation because it felt like a good tiebreaker to bet on the player that I liked a little bit more in that situation.
Folks, if you guys drop your questions in the chat, and I saw there was a dynasty trade that we're going to grade here in a while, we will get to all the questions. Right now, we're going to start this thing off talking about Scott Fish, but anything you guys might have questions about Scott Fish or fantasy football in general, Austin and I will get to every question on this show. If you've never tuned into an episode of Mock It Like It's Hot before, the draft goes on in the background. Eventually, we'll start talking about the draft, but up until that point, I just kind of like to talk about interesting players, things that might affect your league. A lot of you probably aren't in Scott Fish Bowl, but I still want this show to matter to you. And the mock draft kind of just gives you an idea. For this league, Austin, I guess the best way to put it is high bonus leagues. I will say the leagues with no positional requirements are becoming popular all of a sudden. We've been doing it for 4 years at Club Fantasy as our writers league. Our good friend Steve Lawson actually beat Scott Fish by about a month with his position fluid drafting, roster fluid drafting for the Rainbow Bowl, and then Scott's doing it. So there may be more leagues out there with no positional requirements that might find a mock like this interesting, Austin.
Yeah, and I see the appeal in them because I think particularly when you're thinking about somebody new to fantasy football, there's a lot to think about when it comes to positional advantage and which positions are deep, which positions are not. How do I even think about when I start to take a quarterback versus when I take my tight end? And let's not even get into the fact that like defensive and players and kickers, like they'll look like they're projected for more than other positions. And you think, oh, I should take them in the 9th round, but like you shouldn't take them into the last round. Like there's a lot that goes into learning fantasy football for the first time. And so I think as people have as fantasy football has grown, like making it more accessible to new people has become more and more important. That's why best ball, I think, became so popular so quickly. And the positionless aspect of it is another way to go about it, because then you just pick your favorite players.
I was just going to say
that is the most fun part of fantasy football, is pulling for the people you want to pull for.
Austin, it doesn't surprise me that you like this format. You and I have become close over the last 4 years of doing shows together. And you were the first person to pitch the idea, and we're going to have a draft about this in August, about no required tight end position. And we have our reasons, and we're not going to get into this show, but you were the first to really talk about that. You are also one of the best champions I know for best ball. And I think a a format like this appeals for a lot of the same reasons best ball appeals a lot for newer fantasy players, because you get to tell them it's the draft. Don't worry about setting a lineup. We're going to set the lineup for you. But in a league like this, and in a league like the Gods and Goddesses League here at Club Fantasy, it's best ball, but it's best ball with waivers. So there's still a reason to stay active and care about fantasy football, but you at least don't have to worry about the lineup. With this, just like you said, start your favorite players every week. My bone to pick, and I'll bring it up one more time, but start your favorite players every week. The only thing I don't like about this, it kills the trade market. If you were in a league with trades, you're never going to see a trade because nobody has a need. Plain and simple. There's one reason, Austin, I think maybe you force a quarterback to be started in a format like this, just because maybe someone will trade a quarterback for an ancillary piece and something like that. But the way we have it, like, I don't think we've seen a trade in the Club Fantasy Writers League in the 4 years we've been running it.
No. And I mean, I think if you're looking for something with a little bit more activity, then this might not be the format for you. But back to the point of like making it accessible to new people to the league, one of the least favorite parts of learning how to play fantasy football for many people is dealing with trades, because there's a lot of jerks out there when it comes to trading. I often don't like trading and I've been playing for over a decade now, and because people are always trying to get you on the trade market. But if you're in a seasoned league where you enjoy your league mates and you have like some like built sense of like camaraderie and trust built in around trades, then yes, it is unfortunate to have the trade aspect taken away in the all flex league.
Yeah, like I said, that's the only thing you would ever hear me complain about it. One of these days, I'm going to learn how to turn these emojis off so they don't cover up half the teams down at the bottom. Austin, before we move on and talk about the early parts of this draft, I want to get some of the chat in here. First of all, Jamie's been killing the chat, as he often does. Jamie mentioned that he has been incorporating the no tight end required, but making it tight end premium, so they find a way to get into their flex spot. That's Austin's been an advocate of that for ages, and he also enjoys best ball leagues with waivers, dynasty leagues even with waivers. So there's a lot to go on there. And then I also wanted to get, Jamie is also a slow drafter, and it has his team. So Austin, I was going to say, let's break down Jamie's team a little bit. Jamie, what slot are you picking from? Austin, let's throw a guess out from. I'm going to guess with Barkley and Taylor, he's picking 7th or 8th. And he may have picked his own spot here, which then I would definitely be right. So.
Wow, I am shocked that so Jamie just said the 7th, and I was shocked by that. I looked at that and I said, "Oh, probably the 3rd pick," because in my Scott Fish draft, Saquon Barkley went with the 4th pick, and I got Jonathan Taylor and Alvin Kamara, and they fell all the way to the end of the 2nd round, and all the way to the end of the 3rd round. Alvin Kamara made it to the 312, whereas what Jamie is suggesting is that he got Barkley at the 107, and then likely got Taylor at the 205, and then Kamara at the 305. So that's one thing that we should just name about, like, as I talk about where players went in my draft, it doesn't mean that's what's going to happen.
Well, I do want to throw
your
out
draft.
Jamie literally got his first 3 picks in this draft.
Oh, incredible. Incredible. So there will be fluctuation. So I was surprised that was the 107. But I do love this build until I see Evan Ingram, just because I'm a notorious Evan Ingram hater. And I am not super into the 2 tight end build for this league, or really for any league. But I get that Ingram often gets the volume. And so like that's something
the key in this league.
That is the key in this league, especially with tight ends. So I get the appeal. I see the thinking. It's just not. I'm never going to click the button for Evan Ingram unless I'm like playing a best ball league and I'm specifically trying to stack him with somebody.
Yeah, I'm writing an article on Evan Ingram next week, and Josh, we just did a show together recently. He said, "Ryan, I cannot wait to read your Evan Ingram article, and I can't wait to figure out what I'm actually going to write about." This is one of these articles, Austin, and a lot of our writer friends can probably relate. I agreed to write about Ingram because I find him to be the most interesting player in Denver right now. I don't know which way I'm going to go with it. I'm going to break down Evan Ingram. I'm going to break down the system, And I'm going to let the article determine my conclusion on Evan Ingram because I don't know how I feel right now.
Yeah, I've definitely been there. That's how I felt when I wrote the Tyrone Tracy article earlier this year when we did a
Yeah.
look inside for the Giants. I was like, I don't actually know what I think about Tyrone Tracy. We're just going to kind of go for it and see what happens.
Yeah, that's a very similar feel. Like I said, my favorite was Josh was like, I cannot wait to read your article. And I was like, oh, me either. I have no idea what
I
I'm
can't.
actually going to say. So
I can't wait to actually write my notes and figure out even what that's going to look like.
exactly. All right, guys. We don't break down every single pick of this draft, but I do like to break down the early picks, the first 3 rounds, and we're gonna let Austin talk about some of these picks and anything we see differently. There's a player that I am obligated to bring up about Scott Fishbowl. I'm sure he went in the first 3 rounds here. I'll be okay, he did. Later than I thought he would, and possibly to an auto pick. So we'll get into that in just a moment. The draft starts off with Josh Allen, goes to Brock Bowers. As I mentioned, it's somewhat a super flex league, but Josh Allen's a good pick regardless. It's a very much tight end premium league, so Brock Bowers going there is not completely unusual. Austin in my 101, Bijan Robinson falls to the 3. Ashton Genty is the next RB off the board at 4. Trey McBride at 5. Jameer Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Jamar Chase, Lamar Jackson, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jaden Daniels. I don't find anything particularly outstanding about that, and that means like I don't like it. I don't think anything weird happened in the first round. Joe Burrow, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry start off the second round. Jalen Hurts, Malik Neighbors, Jonathan Taylor, Devon Achane, Bucky Irving, Puka Nacua, George Kittle, Brian Thomas Jr., and Amon-Ra St. Brown again. Pretty standard second round. We're still going to talk about it, but this is a third round reversal. If you guys have never seen a third round reversal draft, what happens is the person who picked last in the first round picks first in the second round and the third round to kind of balance out what they lost by picking so late in the first round. So the person who took Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow also walks away with Ladd McConkey. Kyron Williams is the next pick. AJ Brown, Omarion Hampton, Drake London, Alvin Kamara, Chase Brown, Nico Collins, Josh Jacobs, Travis Hunter, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Garrett Wilson. Austin, do not talk about Travis Hunter because that's the next topic I'm going to force you to talk about. But when you look at this first round, does anything stand out? I'll bring up the first one and let me know if you agree. This is the first one I've seen in a while where George Kittle went as high as he did.
Yeah, so that was actually one of the things I was going to talk about. Both the tight ends and quarterbacks are higher up in this draft so far than what has happened in my Scott Fish draft, and I think again that comes back to the ADP settings whenever you have the mock draft set up. So I would expect in actual drafts for some of those players to go later. So for reference, with George Kittle in particular, and my draft, he went in the 4th round at the 4-7. And it's interesting because Brock Bowers and Trey McBride, they did both go in the first round at the 1-9 and the 1-10. And then George Kittle was the next tight end drafted. So there was a 3-round gap between tight end 2 and tight end 3. Whereas in this draft, we see actually 4 tight ends going in those first 4 rounds. Yeah. Similarly with the quarterbacks, they're not as pushed up as extremely as the tight ends, like I just described. In this mock, it took to the 2-4 for 5 quarterbacks to go off the board. In my draft, it took all the way to the 2-8. But the one thing I will say about that is they were all like, there wasn't a quarterback. Josh Allen didn't go until the 108 in my Scott Fish draft. So I would be surprised to see him go 101, except for folks that just love Josh Allen. Just because there are some running backs that really stand out with their potential value because of the dynamics of the scoring system.
Yeah. Like I said, the thing that immediately jumped out to me, Josh Allen at 1 obviously stood out, but I'm never going to argue with someone about Josh Allen at 1. But Kittle getting pulled that far up, there's 2 more players I want to talk about before we get into the meat of the show. Or the 2 more things I want to talk about. Are you shocked about the gap between the tight ends? So you have Kittle at 2 in the second round, Hawkinson in the 4th round, and we're probably going to do a segment about Hawkinson because I have thoughts. And then a little bit of Laporta and Kelsey, and then everybody just lays off of tight ends all the way down until the 7th round? I'm trying to watch it on the little screen here. The 8th round. And the player I want to bring up on this, Austin, is Mark Andrews. I've had a feeling lately that Mark Andrews is getting mildly disrespected, and I'm not saying he belongs in the Bowers, McBride, and maybe even the Kittle tier, but I think he's probably the next. I think he's the 4th player, and maybe even in a tier on his own. I'd put him ahead of Laporta, falling all the way to the 8th when you have Kittle and Hawkinson going in the first 4 rounds is weird to me.
Yeah, I do think the gap between those guys is a little bit shocking. I think what you probably have is someone who really loves TJ Hawkinson.
Oh,
When it
okay.
comes to Mark Andrews too, though, I do think that I do think he has kind of become like a better in best ball type player.
Mm,
And I think that's starting to creep into these types of drafts. Like I do feel like while he has the ceiling, I don't based on his performance last year, I don't feel super confident in putting him in as a starter every week. And it's reflected in the actual draft too when you get the actual scoring.
it
Mark
is.
Andrews didn't go to the 9th round
Okay.
in my draft. Now there was less of it. There was a big gap between Trey McBride and George Kittle, but then Sam Laporte and Travis Kelce went the very next round.
Oh, interesting.
But Mark Andrews in particular, he is at least in my draft as well, has fallen into that category where, I mean, in my draft, he's stuck between Evan Ingram and Colston Loveland in terms of where
Interesting.
he got drafted. I
I
don't know
guess
that that's right. That feels like a
yeah.
value at that point, but I do think that the kind of the lack of a floor that we've seen with him recently has potentially caused that.
Yeah, it's just everybody expects TJ Hawkinson just to come back so much better because he obviously was down last year. But I'm like, what if he wasn't? And like Mark Andrews has been the tight end one. Now, I guess Hawkinson has as well, but I don't know. It's a weird one to me. Austin, let's move on to the first player that I feel like we need to talk about. And that is, of course, Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter is I think, the most hot topic when it comes to Scott Fishbowl scoring. And we've spent a lot of time discussing his ADP in the Club Fantasy chat. And what we've come to the conclusion with is that his ADP doesn't matter. And the reason what we mean by that is, specifically for Scott Fishbowl, let me be clear here, is the variance on where Travis Hunter is going. I have seen drafts where he is a first round pick, and I'm hearing about drafts where he's a 5th round pick. So his ADP is going to say 3rd round. That gives you literally nothing because it's going to depend on who you're drafting with and how they feel about him. So my question to you is, Austin, how do you feel about Travis Hunter, and where did he go in your draft?
How I feel about Travis Hunter is I will not be drafting him at
Ooh,
all in Scott Fishbowl, and I probably will. I'll probably draft him some in other formats. Probably not as much in redraft. Maybe in IDP. Probably in IDP settings. That's where
yeah,
I would draft him. Um, and then even in best ball settings, I don't know that I'll draft him at his ADP. It's going to come down to like what is the trade off? What's the opportunity cost? Like, am I going to be picking him over someone that I know is going to get snaps on offense and meaningful snaps on offense consistently week over week? I worry a little bit about. I want to see it. You know, this is my big thing with Travis Hunter, and in a league like this, like if you just believe in it, like go for it. It's free. It's for charity. Like whatever, go for it. If you are paying money and like you're in a league where you're gambling, then I start to feel more hesitant about putting my money on him just because I do think the league is going to test him and he could very well thrive in that. Like I don't want to bet against him in terms of like I don't want to root against the guy. I want to see him prove it first because I mean I've already seen people like other NFL players like I think it was Travis Kelce came out and was like, oh, offenses are going to test him and they're going to try and wear him out. And I think like when he said that, I was like, oh yeah, of course. If there's a guy that is going up against Travis Hunter, I could easily see people changing the play at the line of scrimmage to say, all right, you know what, you just go run as fast as you can and let's test his endurance and let's wear him out and take him out of this game and see how that goes and
yeah.
or get physical with him, like find different ways to try and really test his overall endurance throughout a game. And I ultimately want to see how that plays out before I am banking on him in the first 3 rounds of a draft. If I get to the 4th round, it starts to be a little bit of a different conversation. I'll still care about who else is available on the board. But in my draft and Scott Fish, he went at the 412.
Okay.
Which
I'm going to quickly throw Lewis up here just because he played the hero for us and went to the Scott Fishbowl ADP calculator.
nice.
Earliest he went is 105. Latest he went is 606, but 34.1, which would make him, what is that?
That's the early 4th. Or no, late third.
Late third. So 310 is what his ADP is. So it's exactly what I was saying. It's such a wide spread, but we can call it 310, and then hilariously he goes at the 310 in this draft.
Incredible. Yeah, but he went at the 412 in my draft, and I think I feel okay with it. I mean, the thing is, even in my draft, he goes ahead of like Marvin Harrison and ahead of Kyler Murray, and like that's the thing that gets me is like, who are you missing out on to get Travis Hunter?
Yeah.
And he really is just going to have to pay off on both sides of the ball for that to work out, to take him over a Kyler Murray or a Marvin Harrison.
That's fair. So I'm going to give my opinion on it just so we don't have a guest tonight. You guys can hear me babble a little bit. So Austin, I came up with a rudimentary way to add IDP stats to my offensive projections. And I understand that my own offensive projections are not the end all be all, but I do know the kind of research I put into my projections, so I trust them. When I statted Travis Hunter out, I very rarely predict injuries. If a player is always injured, his injuries are kind of baked into my ranking or my projections because I look at what he's done the last 2 to 3 years and I kind of give him similar value and then decide if I think they're going to be better or worse. So the injury is baked in. So I say all of that to say Travis Hunter is a offensive only player. Austin statted out as my wide receiver 47. So like you, I don't think I'll touch him in any non-IDP league. Then I went in and created a small menu. Travis Hunter is the only player in my projections history who now has his own menu to go ahead and put in his projected defensive stats. And while I know IDP enough, Austin, I do not pretend to be an IDP expert. But what I did was I looked at the DBs for the last 2 years and gave him the equivalent of like the 50th best DBs stats. So it's like 30 tackles. I think I gave him 4 picks, 1 touchdown, like just very basic stats. In this scoring, Austin, it takes him from wide receiver 47 in my projections to wide receiver 11. So there is something there by giving him the defense. Obviously, I could be crazy wrong about all projections. Let's be clear. We always could. But you said something that I wanted to get to in this. And at least one of my league is doing this draft with us, the great Lewis Hall. There may be others in here. I think there were because I put this out for the New York City Live folks. If you think there could be something there, why not? And I have already made the decision, Austin. Travis Hunter will not get past me in the second round. I'm not going to take him with my first round pick at 111. I am probably going to take him at 2-2. I could wait and see what happens at 3-2, but I feel like I'm going to have some feisty people. Plus, if I'm the earliest, if I'm the earliest person, Jay Kaplan is picking at 12. So Jay Kaplan now can ruin this entire thing. Have at it, buddy. And here's why I think you should do it, Jay Kaplan. Austin, I'm going to be in a room with 60 to 100 inebriated fantasy football people. And when I take Travis Hunter that early, the room's going to explode, and I live for that adrenaline rush. So I think it's going to be really fun at a live draft, and I do want to spend some time talking about live drafts a little bit again later on in this show. But Austin, I think that could be fun, and I do think he could pop and do something. I did check my own projections. He is projected as like a third-round pick for me, but I'm willing to take him in the second round. Where you said you don't want to take him in the first 3, I completely concur with that. Jay Kaplan has promised me he won't take him in the chat right now. But Austin, I think I'll take him at 2-2 because it is Scott Fishbowl, and why the hell not?
I mean, that's bold. I will say that.
It's not the earliest. I've just found that out. So.
That is true. It is not the earliest. However, you could have Lamar Jackson or Jaden Daniels at the 2-2.
I certainly could. And I'm probably going to live to regret with what I'm doing here, but I'll certainly have fun with it.
But also, nobody ever did well in Scott Fishbowl by just like going along with like whatever like the standard assumptions were, right? To me, my approach to this contest, or not, is not a contest, to this tournament is every year there's some like niche scoring that he does that makes one player really interesting. And I just fade that narrative every year because last year it was Rashid Shaheed. Everybody's like, I was going to say, that's what Travis Hunter is. And I was like, I'm going to fade that. And yeah, okay, he got injured and that's why it worked out. But also, like, it's not like he was like crushing it on kick return points up until then.
However, we said the wrong player because while I do love Rashid Shaheed, it was not Rashid Shaheed who was the Scott Fishbowl cheat code last year. It was Kavontae Turpin from Dallas who finished as the wide receiver 5 in Scott Fishbowl scoring last year.
That is such a shame.
The kid had like 11 catches, folks, and was the wide receiver 5 because of his kick and punt return yardage. So yeah, Austin, that's where I stand on Travis Hunter. I think he's a big enigma. I'll throw one last thing out there just for folks who are not in Scott Fishbowl but want to talk about this. My home league, Austin, is a 3-keeper league where we don't have draft costs. You just keep 3 guys, and those are your first 3 players to start the league. We are also a 1 IDP league, and I kind of did the math. The way Scott Fishbowl is boosting Travis Hunter is actually exactly how he'll get boosted in my league as well. And so, in my opinion, in the upcoming draft where you could keep this kid forever, I think he should be the 101 of that draft. Because we'll already have our 3 keepers. He's the 4th player on your team. And I think potentially if the world is right about Travis Hunter, he could be the most valuable player in my league's history who just has that 1 IDP spot.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about trading up to the early first round in my home league as well because it has it has IDP settings. It has 4 IDP spots. And so the point being, I could put him in and that's the one with the receiver flex position. So I could put him in as my receiving flex. I'd probably rather have Travis Hunter than a tight end. Like, yeah. That's probably going to work out in that setting, especially where it's half PPR scoring. And I think if I remember correctly, we like gave a bonus to cornerbacks so that if they deflect a pass, it's like 4 points instead of just the 2, which is often standard in IDP leagues. So I've definitely considered it in that kind of format. Again, that's where you have the IDP, which Scott Fish did. So there's going to be some intrigue there for sure.
Austin, the next player I want to talk about is a player, and I did not realize how much time we were going to spend on Travis Hunter, but hey, it's just me and you tonight. A player that coming into the draft, you were not an enormous fan of, and I doubt that his landing spot helped you any. And he got taken in this draft by someone who is actually in the chat with us right now. Robert Smith is picking from the oh no, I apologize. It is. I forgot I scrolled. Robert Smith, who is picking from the 9 spot, and he made a joke that his draft is ugly, but it probably means he's going to be good. He's picking from the 9 spot. Robert selected Omarion Hampton, Austin, in the 3rd round. And so I scrolled and left the 3rd round up there. I'll get the 3rd round off the board just so everybody knows we're not going to talk about every pick. We're not going to talk about every round. I kind of leave it on there for you guys to take a look at. But Austin, Omarion Hampton was a guy who you were not a big fan of when the mock drafts were coming out with him being the 2nd running back taken. He was still the 2nd running back taken. He ends up in kind of an ambiguous situation with the Chargers and now goes in the 3rd round of this draft. I have had a bone to pick with rookie ADP this entire summer. Rookie fever is very real. Robert, feel free to defend yourself in the chat. Everything we say on this show is all love. But Austin, I think 3rd round for Omarion Hampton is a little high for my blood.
Yeah, it's a little high for my blood as well. I mean, I think in this draft, it means that you're taking him ahead of who are you taking him ahead of? Where am I? Why can't I find him on the screen right now? Oh, that's because I think the top row is the first pick. I'm looking.
Yep, I scrolled to round 3. Round 3 is the first pick of the lines right now.
Yeah, so I think putting him ahead of Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs, in particular, that's where it feels rich for my blood because I don't feel convinced that he's going to have that 3-down role and he's going to have it secured. I think that, I mean, maybe he does, but I could also see them shaking things up in Los Angeles a little bit. It feels like some of the other guys coming behind him in ADP are a little bit more interesting. I will say, whenever I got to the end of the 3rd round turn at the 3-12-4-1, Omarion Hampton was one of the players that was up there in terms of projected points in the same range as Alvin Kamara and Chuba Hubbard. And so I did consider it. I kind of sat for a second and thought, do I want to go with him or do I want to go with one of these guys that I feel a little bit more confidence in? I ended up going with Kamara and Hubbard because I feel like both of those guys have such a solid role in their backfields. They're going to get a bunch of pass catching work and they're going to get the volume to be really dominant in this. Whereas I feel like Hampton, like, I could still see it going different ways. And again, like you mentioned, I wasn't a huge fan of him coming out in the process. So,
Yeah.
third round's rich for me.
Yeah, and Robert says he's not going to defend his pick. He says it's ugly, but he said something that I think is interesting. And Austin, it goes back to the Travis Hunter discussion. He's not defending. He's planting the flag on guys he thinks has upside. If you are of the mind that Omarion Hampton made Najee Harris worthless, obviously Austin and I disagree with you, as does most of Club Fantasy. But that's okay, because believe me, we've been wrong before. But if you are of that mind, Austin, if you think Omarion Hampton is a 250 carry, 50 target back, then he's a monster this season, especially in that offense. And so, again, I can defend the pick for him because I see the upside. It's just certainly not where I would take Hampton. And like I said, to me, it's an indictment on rookie ADP in general, because obviously I was about to just completely shit on Robert's team. My apologies, buddy, because he took all the rookies. Travion Henderson was his next pick, Quinshon Judkins, but RJ Harvey goes to Ryan Kirby at the 5'8". And Austin, I just see some of these guys like going ahead of established guys. And you mentioned Kyler Murray. Rushing quarterbacks in this format have obscene value, and I'm not going to take a questionable running back over a established rushing quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I even think like, okay, the ADP of the running backs is off, but I even think the sequencing of the running backs feels weird to me. Like I would rather draft Travion Henderson over Omarion Hampton, because I think Henderson has a chance for a 3-down role. And I do think that the Patriots run the ball a lot. I also am more interested in Quinshon Judkins than I am both of those guys. So some of it's like them being pushed up in general, and some of it's just the order in which they're going. For reference, and my draft, which I know I keep referencing and nobody probably really cares about it actually, but it was actually the same thing. Hampton went ahead of Henderson and Judkins, and that doesn't feel right to me. I was going to be taking Travion Henderson if he had fallen back to me where I was in my draft, and he didn't make it all the way back to me. But I think that to me, those two guys have a clear route to being the number one running back, and extensively so, and having that 3-down role potential. Whereas Hampton, I do think even with Najee Harris having this firework accident, it sounds like he's going to be back and like ready to go at the beginning of the season. And I think like it's not going to impact his availability. And so, and Harris, he can carry the load. Like that was the thing that really made him relevant coming out his rookie year. He had 300 carries off the bat, and while his efficiency wasn't great in Pittsburgh these past couple of years, he still carried a lot, which really is what gets me.
He doesn't get hurt. He's a Mack truck. And so now clearly fireworks are a lesson of a whole other ilk. Ask I think it was Jason Pierre-Paul. But it sounds like it was an eye injury for Harris. Clearly he didn't have that great a vision to begin with. I don't mean to make jokes. I hope he's fine. But again, you're absolutely right. Harris isn't someone I think that we can just toss away. I've scrolled the draft a little bit. You can see rounds 6 through 15 on the board right now. Austin, what I'm noticing when I see these rounds early on in the draft, I'm actually going to scroll up just really quickly to illustrate my point. One of my favorite things, Austin, we talk about this every year, is the color coding on Sleeper. So when I have the first, 10 rounds up here, I'm noticing a lot more green than I'm noticing anything else. And that is running backs. It's probably closer to even with wide receivers, but it definitely feels green heavy, especially towards the early rounds. When I scroll to what I want to call the middle, Austin, it does start to feel like the wide receivers start to take over a little bit. Though, as we get back into the late, it's almost like it's an ebb and flow where we're going running backs, wide receivers, running backs. So when you look at these middle round picks, Austin, is anything standing out to you? It seems like everybody's getting gun shy and wanting to make sure they land their quarterbacks. Jamie actually asked a question about his quarterbacks that I'll put up on the screen here in just a few minutes. But do you notice anything interesting in these rounds? Any players that you're maybe surprised? I'll throw another one at you. Jonnu Smith still going in the 10th in that crazy Pittsburgh situation. I don't mean to just talk about tight ends today. And I think it was Brocal's team I'm talking about with both of these. But anyway, I find that to be another interesting pick because I feel like ADP hasn't quite caught up with his trade to Pittsburgh yet.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think the tight end situation in general is interesting. I feel like there's a lot of tight ends going, And I think I wonder if part of what's happening is people are thinking, oh, tight ends get 3.5 points whenever they catch a ball. That's so great. We should really go after them. And it's like, okay, but they still only, like, you get 2.5 points for any catch if you're not a
Yeah.
tight end. So it's only a 1 point premium on the tight end position
Yeah,
for
don't
catches,
freak out too much about it because they're only getting one extra point. That's a great point.
which it is meaningful, but to the point that we always raise when it comes to tight end premium, it usually just makes the elite tight ends better. It
So
usually
much better.
it doesn't really balance out the position, quote unquote. But the other trend that you named, I think, is right on point, where there's kind of this ebb and flow where you'll see like receivers will be really popular for a little bit, and then it switches to running backs, and then back and forth. And in my draft, it's actually interesting. If you were to look at the color coding at the beginning of the draft, the left side of the board, the early picks are all green for running backs, and the right side is all blue for receivers, and then it swaps at about round 4, where all of a sudden just also where their value is within the
Yeah.
round. So you can see based on where your draft slot is, it will help you. It will kind of determine where that crossover point is between the running back and receiver positions. And I've experienced that so far, where the first 4 picks was like, yeah, no, I'm taking running backs. Like, where the running backs that are available right now, they all clearly have a pathway to be the highest scoring players on the board. And now it's just like all receivers, all quarterbacks. And, if I look towards my next set of picks, I think it's going to be more of the same, where it's actually, well, it's getting to a point where it's a little bit heavy towards the quarterbacks, but I already have 2 quarterbacks. So I'm not going to just take a third quarterback for the heck of it.
Yeah.
But then it's like a bunch of receivers then starting to creep in. So it will ebb and flow through the draft, because it is just about the best players in this setting, because there's no positions. So it is worth just like paying attention to where that crossover point happens between the different positions.
I want to throw Jamie up on the screen with his question because it plays into my next question. He says he's not a fan of the quarterbacks in this strategy, or maybe he means his own quarterbacks, but they're both bench players for him. And what do we think about that draft strategy? And Austin, I meant to get to this earlier when we were talking and missed it. So I'm glad this worked out the way it did. My thoughts on quarterbacks in this is I feel like there's probably the safest floor when it comes to volume. A healthy quarterback, exactly for the most part what they're going to do per game. You're probably looking at 200 yards. You're probably looking at 1 or 2 touchdowns, and then you hope for bigger games. And so what I wanted to bring up about these middle round picks is you start to see some of the ancillary quarterbacks go, the non-trustworthy quarterbacks go. And I do want to kind of point to Jamie's team, who took Tua Tagovailoa and Sam Darnold at 15, a starting quarterback. But then I want to look at Lewis's team right next to him, Michael Penix, a starting quarterback, Cam Ward, a rookie starting quarterback. And then you have Geno Smith a little bit later in the 12th round, even Aaron Rodgers way down in the 15th round. I find this to be very interesting picks, Austin, because I feel like quarterbacks probably have a safe floor, and they probably have a very good ceiling, because quarterbacks are one of the few people in this league that can drop 4 touchdowns and it's still just kind of like a pretty good game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to that. I think the quarterback situation, like the fact that you have to start, like you have to make your roster decisions in this league, I think it can be easy to like lose that thread as you're drafting, because when you're drafting, you're just like, I need to pick the best players. I need to pick the best players. And it's like, okay, but eventually you have to set a lineup every week for 17 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's not just about picking the best players, how they look in the draft. It's about when it comes time to set your lineup, how are you going to be able to set your lineup so that it's the best players? And I think that's why, for me, like looking at some of my quarterbacks, I took Bo Nix and Jared Goff, who was an auto pick, but I don't mind Jared Goff where I got him. There's players in that range for both of those quarterbacks where I'm like, I don't know, like they're not going to play 17 games, or, oh, they're going to have some dud games. Like George Pickens is going to have some dud games. I might rather have Jared Goff, who he might have a dud game, but a dud game for a quarterback, to your point, means something different than a dud game for a receiver. Like a dud game for Jared Goff might be 10, 15 points. A dud game for George Pickens could be 2. And so
Yeah.
like I'm going to take Jared Goff in that scenario. Similar thing for Bo Nix. Like I could have taken James Conner there, who when he's playing is probably going to score really good points. But the problem with James Conner is he doesn't play 17 game seasons. So
Yeah.
making sure I have the safe floor with Bo Nix is a viable strategy there. So I think the quarterback situation is really interesting. And not just assuming you don't need a quarterback or you need a bunch of quarterbacks is like the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. You probably can benefit from two good quarterbacks. I just also wouldn't force it. So like there's a balance there to be had.
I love the kinship forming in our chat. Jamie says his favorite team is the 108 besides the genius who drafted 107. So Jamie bigging up himself and the person drafting right next to him. You got to love that. Who is Lewis, who thanks him. And those guys were actually shared guests on this show just 2 weeks ago. I think met each other for the first time on that show. And now they're giving each other love in the chat. You got to love to see that. The draft is over, folks. I will scroll here in just a little bit. We're still going to talk a little bit more. Dan Birch said, thank you. That was fun. Dan, thank you for drafting with us. This show sucks if you guys don't fill these drafts up. So we very much appreciate you. Austin, it's time for your favorite part of the show, my favorite part of the show. Keep, trade, cut, and you get to settle a club fantasy debate that we have been having on our shows for the last week. And it really started with an episode that I don't even think has aired yet. But Joe played a game of Would You Rather where Josh didn't understand the premise. And Josh will tell you he did, but he didn't. And the question I'm going to ask you is going to be about RB2s on their own team. But the question, Austin, is if you knew the RB1 was going to get hurt and miss, we'll call it the second half of the season, and this guy was going to be the starter the entire second half, how would you keep, trade, cut these guys? And the question is Rachaad White, Tyjae Spears, and I use Tyler Algier. We use Zach Charbonnet, but I feel like Zach Charbonnet is the easy answer every single time, so we're not going to use Zach Charbonnet. So Rachaad White, Tyjae Spears, Tyler Algier. It is a PPR format. You got to keep, trade, cut with the assumption that the guy ahead of them is going to miss 8 games this season.
Okay. Easy cut is Tyjae Spears. Okay. I will, neither of these guys really have trade value, so I just keep the one I want. I think, oh gosh, I think I'll keep Tyler Algier because I think that I'll have more PPR usage, and he has historically been more efficient when he is the lead back than Rachaad White. So I will trade Rachaad White.
Okay. I love that you said the easy cut is Tyjae Spears. Immediately Lewis chimes in. He's keeping Tyjae Spears. He's trading Algier and he is cutting White. And guess what? My answer is still different. I am keeping Rachaad White. I am trading Tyler Algier and I'm also cutting Tyjae Spears. Josh hates Rachaad White. It has become a part of his personality. And all I will point out, Austin, is that when Rachaad White had the backfield to himself 2 years ago, he was the RB5 in fantasy football. Not to mention, caught like 50 balls last year. I think Rachaad White is one of the most underrated players simply because, and this is true, he sucks at football. And I don't care that he sucks at football because he is damn good for fantasy, Austin. And I don't understand why people can't separate the two. And when I say people, I mean Josh Hudson.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, I remember playing DFS Cash 2 years ago and just popping Rachaad White in.
Love it. I remember doing the show with you.
Like, because he never got bumped up in price too, because all the DFS sites were like, oh, well, he only gets 2.5 yards per carry. It's like, yeah, but he gets like 20 carries and 2 touchdowns every game. So I'm going to keep going with it.
Yeah, I just found it very interesting. He has such a negative connotation. What's hilarious to me, and Daniel Birch says Spears was injured last year. He'll give him a mulligan. And I'm okay with that. I just personally, I think Rachaad White's the most valuable. You can make an argument with me for Tyler Algier because we have seen very good Tyler Algier at times as well. So I have scrolled the draft so that the end of the draft is up, Austin. So I'm going to have you break down your team in just a second. And we are also, because we don't have a guest tonight, we are going to break down the 111 team, Merck's team, because that's the spot I'm picking from. And I want to see where it goes. And I do want to throw Lewis up here one more time. This is Josh's argument, is that Sean Tucker is going to have a bigger role. I am a Syracuse guy through and through. If people have never heard my Syracuse story, I fell in love with Syracuse basketball when I was in 10th grade of high school, or actually earlier than that, 8th grade of middle school. And then I learned about their small forward who also played quarterback for their team, a gentleman named Donovan McNabb. And so from that point forward, I was a huge Donovan McNabb fan. My son's name is literally Donovan after Donovan McNabb. Big Syracuse guy. I love Sean Tucker. Austin, the second everybody was healthy last year, they just stopped giving him carries, even though he had monster games. I feel like we all love Sean Tucker a lot more than the NFL loves Sean Tucker.
Yeah, I do think that is probably accurate. Sean Tucker is one of these guys that I'm like, I like to take him in best ball late rounds because it's like at that point you're just taking dart throws at that rate anyways. I do feel uncertain that he will get a ton of touches, but I think to Lewis's point, if Bucky Irving misses time, I think then Sean Tucker potentially is able to get wrangle some more time in the backfield. I am a fan of him, but these murky situations in a redraft setting, I would rather go with the guy that I think is likely to be the lead back, and then I will just spend on my fab later on in the season if it turns out somebody else pops off.
Jonathan Kaplan. There will be no Donovan McNabb besmirching on a show that I am hosting. I won't allow it, Austin. I will not allow it. Austin, we don't have a ton of time here. Let's talk about these late round picks. Your build is so interesting. And I also noticed that Sean Tucker went at the 111 spot. So we'll be talking about, well, let me be clear. He went at the 21-2 spot. So we will be talking mildly about that team here in a second. But Austin, obviously, as we got back to the end of the draft, it's kind of what we were talking about. We see a bigger swing back towards running backs, but it's also kind of what you described where the left and the right, the right side of the board is now still taking wide receiver, though I think you've skewed that view a little bit. And then the left side, skewed by Ryan Kirby, is still leaning on running back. So, Austin, I'll just ask you as we get to the end of this draft, any interesting picks while you look the board over? I will say the thing I'm noticing is while everybody seems hesitant to take quarterbacks early in the draft, we are willing to take anybody who has the word QB next to their name at the end of the draft, because we got Jackson Dart, Tyler Shough, Joe Flacco, Daniel Jones, Shadur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, Spencer Rattler. Now, I do question how many of these may have been auto picks. Kirk Cousins and Joe Milton all go. So it seems like at the end, when people stop liking the names of the offensive players, they're just like, well, fuck it, I'll take a quarterback.
Yeah, I do think that definitely happened. I'm very fascinated to see what the actual draft does compared to this, because things definitely got weird in my mind towards the end of the draft. Like guys like Raheem Mostert, Ollie Gordon, like Isaiah Davis, like they're not going to get those running backs. I don't think they're going to get meaningful touches. And so for me, the way like I approach this towards the end is like, who do I think is going to be touching the ball the most at this point in the draft? I think Jalen Tolbert touches the ball more than Luke Schoonmaker. I think Adonai Mitchell touches the ball more than Harold Fannin this year, So that's why I went so heavy receiver down the stretch. Now there's some guys in here still like Kareem Hunt's a good example at the 16-11. He could end up having some interesting value if they just keep running with him, but I also could see him having just been a one-year wonder. Keenan Allen in the 18th round is a little bit wild to me. Although, is he no longer with the Bears?
He does not have a job right now. Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper are both still free agents.
I did not realize that. So that makes a little bit more sense than him not having a team. I think if he were to sign tomorrow, he would probably go a little bit higher.
He'd fly up. It's the Darren Waller effect. Darren Waller went from having no ADP in best ball, Austin, to the 18th round instantly, which I know doesn't sound like high. I'm playing on DraftKings where that's a 2-round bump. Yeah, and so he's went from being undrafted into the 18th round, and that was a week after being signed by the Miami Dolphins. So
and he went in the 17th round in this draft ahead of Hollywood Brown and Xavier Legette. Like, I don't know, like 2 of Patrick Mahomes' receivers were drafted after Darren Waller. So like again, it's my thing where like at this point, the things that surprise me are picks where I'm like not convinced that there's going to be playing time there. Like Shadur Sanders, he is a 5th round pick. I don't like, is he going to snap the ball?
Yeah, we all have these like gut feelings, but like when you look at the experts, they don't think like he's going to get many starts this season. So
so it's going to be, I'm curious how it actually plays out in the draft, and there will probably be somebody in here that I just named that like pops off randomly, but
100%.
In large part, like it is more likely that the receivers at this part of the draft are going to be getting touches than the running backs. The running backs are going to be waiver wire ads, or they're going to be the first player you go to drop when you need to pick somebody up off the waivers.
Yep. Austin, we had a dynasty trade, not question, but just kind of a thing earlier in the show. And I want to get to that before we get to your team and wrap this show up, because I think this might be the biggest instance of highway robbery I've seen in a while. Dynasty rookie draft traded the 1-7, the 1-9, and the 2-9 for the 101. Austin, I had a draft where I had similar picks than that and offered more and could not get the person. I had the 102, Austin, and offered the 102, the 107, and the 109, and could not get the 101 to get Ashton Genty.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much with you. Like, okay, when I look at our club dynasty draft this year, the 107, the 109, and the 209, that would have been Caleb Johnson, Amika Ibuka, and Colson Loveland. Or no, sorry, not Colson Loveland.
Yeah.
Sorry, it would be Mason Taylor was the 209. Okay. So Caleb Johnson, Amika Ibuka, and Mason Taylor
for Genty.
I think I'd take Genty.
Yeah, it's just it was wild to me when it came through, and everybody in the chat was hyping him up, but I was like, that is just flat out robbery. All right, Austin, you know the deal, my friend. As I scroll back up here to the top of your team, talk to us about what your strategy was. I'm sure it was best player available, but you kind of already touched on how you made your coin toss decisions at the end of the draft. But talk to me about any players on here that you're especially excited might have fallen to you.
Yeah, I think if you're at the 110 spot, getting somebody like CeeDee Lamb is really appealing, especially if you have a situation like I did where both of Brock Bowers and Trey McBride are off the board. If one of those two tight ends are there, then there's maybe a case where you're like, let me get my tight end now, because especially those two guys, they can be really elite. Especially, I think Trey McBride, he's an interesting player this year in general because he did not score a ton of touchdowns last year.
No, there's positive regression.
Yeah, there's definitely positive regression heading his way. And so I like going with him. But CeeDee Lamb at the 110, I really like being able to capture him there. And then getting Derrick Henry at the beginning of the second round, I actually was a big fan of because he does carry the ball a lot. And while he doesn't get the level of pass catching upside that people are associating with this format, he is efficient enough and getting enough touches that he's a relevant player. He went with the 6th pick overall in my draft, so it felt like a value to me to be able to get him in the second round. And then to your point, like I went best player available, and I usually went with players that I was like, I think they're going to get tons of volume. I think AJ Brown is going to be in for a bounce back year this year. I don't think the Eagles are going to be playing from ahead as much as they were. Not that I think they're going to lose a lot of games, but they would get up by like 2-3 touchdowns, and then they would just run the ball to Saquon Barkley for the rest of the game. And, that was it. And so I think if they're in closer games, AJ Brown then continues to have a role in the second half of games, which helps his overall fantasy value. So I love him in the third round. I like Marvin Harrison for a bounce back. I went with Devontae Smith too. So I have both Philadelphia receivers. I think that's fine. Like I could see them both having a good season. Did get Mark Andrews as well. At that point in the draft, like a player like Mark Andrews, I feel like has the same amount of value as a receiver. And so decided to go with the upside. And then after that, I was truly basically PPR chasing players that I thought who might catch a ton of balls. And so that's where you see I get guys like Adam Thielen, Josh Palmer. I could see getting a decent amount of catches.
I think Josh Palmer is one of the best values in fantasy football, certainly in the best ball drafts I'm doing right now, Austin.
Yeah. And, a guy like Xavier Legette, if he has positive development, he was a decent target for Bryce Young. If he can actually rein in some balls this year, get some more confidence from Bryce Young, maybe he takes a step forward. Diami Brown was an interesting player down the stretch for Washington. Now he's in Jacksonville, so he could get some catch balls. And at this point, it's who are the potential high upside guys that I just want to be able to hold on to?
I doubt it was your strategy, but I wonder if there's not something to Austin. In a deep league like this, 22 spots, 11 on your bench. When you have ambiguous late wide receiver situations, and I'm going to use Adam Thielen and Xavier Legette, it's probably not the worst idea to grab both, let the cards shake out for 4 weeks, and then drop the one that's not performing.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think also, I know I gave a lot of heck to the people that took a bunch of running backs and tight ends in this situation, but I think that thinking applies to the running backs in this situation too, where if there are guys in ambiguous backfields, when you're at this part of the draft and you've already gotten your starting roster set, it's worth taking the dart throws at that point. I think Kareem Hunt's a good example. I think Miles Sanders and Dallas, like I could see him playing a bigger role in that backfield. So I can see some cases where like that thinking also applies to the running back situation and even the tight end situation, where it's like, okay, is Dalton Schultz going to get back to elite Dalton Schultz that we saw a few years ago, where we were all excited and thought, oh, he's like a tight end 3. And then he was like, not at all. So I do think that's a helpful way to think about this portion of the draft. I decided to just go like, who are the best players overall for this, because it's easier for my brain to think about that while I'm trying to talk at the same time. But in the actual draft, thinking about like that potential upside and those ambiguous situations, I think is a really helpful way to go about it.
Yeah, I find that often too. If I'm forced to make a quick pick, I'll take just the best player available in my mind. But if I overthink a pick, I'll take some weird picks where I'm like, oh, but what if this domino and this domino? Jonathan Kaplan says, stop saying positive regression. It's progression. I remember when positive regression became a thing in the like mind of fantasy football people like 7 years ago. I was on the same boat, but I'm a lemming. I just fell into line and just started saying what everybody else says, because I used to say the exact same thing as Kaplan. Positive regression is called progression. There's a word for it. But like I said, unfortunately, I have no spine, Kaplan. So I've bowed to the will of the people. Jamie says, don't forget to tell everyone who your favorite team is and why it's the 107. Jamie once again talking about his team. But Daniel Birch says the 107 and the 111. And Austin, as I mentioned, I am the 111. So I want to go ahead and kind of judge the 111 team. And I'm kind of doing this on the fly because I did not pay a ton of attention to the 111's picks. So Merck, again, this is all love. Austin, he takes Justin Jefferson at the 111. I think that's a dream come true. You talked about CeeDee Lamb. I think everything you said about CeeDee Lamb, we can just copy and paste and say about Justin Jefferson. I think Christian McCaffrey in the second round is still a value. I recently wrote an article that I do think there's still value in Christian McCaffrey. So I'm not going to be mad about that pick. And I'm also a big Kyron Williams guy. His first 3 picks here are absolute gold for me. Obviously, I've already mentioned Travis Hunter would have been my second pick, but my God, if Christian McCaffrey and Travis Hunter are both there, I think I have to gamble till the 3rd round there, and I'm not going to get him. But man, I don't know that I could pass up Christian McCaffrey. I mean, when I'm looking at all these names now, Austin, on the clock, can I really go Travis Hunter over Malik Neighbors, Jonathan Taylor, Devon Achane, Bucky Irving? These are like my favorite. Puka Nacua. I'll tell you guys right now, Kaplan, you're hearing it. Lewis, there's zero chance I can take Travis Hunter at the 2-2. The names are too damn good for me to do it. So now I'm gambling on the 3-2. We'll see what happens there. So Kaplan has a chance to still screw it up. Austin, he goes Baker Mayfield and Justin Fields. These are quarterbacks I don't mind. I don't know that I would have went quarterback there. I don't know that I would have went these guys over Bo Nix. I'm a big Bo Nix guy. I love Caleb Johnson. Actually, I want to stop here and get your thoughts on Caleb Johnson. I've started to, of all the rookies who I don't hate their ADP, I think Caleb Johnson could really just slide right into that Najee Harris role and keep Jaylen Warren right where he is. And in this format with the points per carry, I think that's very valuable in this Scott Fish Bowl.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm not super into buying Jaylen Warren this year. I could see Caleb Johnson, if he probably won't start off taking over this running back room, but I can see by the end of the year, like him having most of the touches in this backfield. So I definitely think Caleb Johnson in this format and in any format where his ADP at is worth it.
And so what I'll throw out here is, looking at this 111, I don't have any negative things I could say immediately about it. My goal here, Austin, is to be completely position agnostic. I'm going to go into this taking best player available. I'm not going to force the quarterback situation. And we'll talk about a forced quarterback pick here in just a second. I'm not going to force the tight end situation. We've already talked a little bit about Evan Ingram. I do love Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft is coming in as my tight end 6 right now in fantasy football. I actually like Hunter Henry as well. I don't know how it would all shake out on the board, because like I see Brandon Ayuk on your team. I feel like Brandon Ayuk's a guy that I like a lot more than other people. But Austin, obviously I'm going to have to stop here in a second, because at the 14-11, he took a pick that you will certainly not see on the Ryan Weiss 14-11 board. And that is Anthony Richardson. I am an Anthony Richardson hater. I was very much against him last year. I was right. Obviously he's far cheaper this year, Austin, but we are now already talking about a shoulder injury for this kid, a kid who already struggles to throw the football. I'm not going to ask you, is it time to stick a fork in Anthony Richardson, but is it time to stick a fork in Anthony Richardson, Austin?
I mean, I kind of said it was last year, but that's just
Yeah.
me. Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't happen this year, it's not happening. He might become a perennial backup, and that's fine. But I don't feel optimistic about his odds this year. I mean, they brought in Daniel Jones, for the love of God. Like, I think Daniel Jones has a better chance to be the starter at this point too. And it's just, I have a hard time clicking the button for Anthony Richardson as well, which is a bummer because early in the year when I did pre-draft best ball leagues, Anthony Richardson was going like, I don't know, the 14th, 15th round in
Which
best
is just
ball leagues.
crazy for a starting quarterback. So
And so I was like, sure. And so I do have a decent amount of Anthony Richardson shares in those specific formats now. Since the NFL draft, that's a different story. So I would like for it to work out because that could be incredible for those leagues, but I'm not doing it moving forward.
yeah, I think that's where I stand with it as well. Is I have players like that too, Austin. My big one that I've recovered slightly from was Jaleel McLaughlin before the J.K. Dobbins signing. I had so much. He just felt like robbery in like the 17th, 18th round. So I just kept adding him. I'm like, people are hating this kid, and I think he could play a Alvin Kamara like role in Denver, and obviously none of that is going to happen. Kaplan jumped in that Travis Hunter's not on his board. I have nothing to be worried about. So he should be mine at 3-2, assuming that everything goes. And Jamie says he'd rather have his first 10 picks in this mock than his first 10 picks in real life. Guys, that is going to be the end of the Scott Fishbowl mock. We are off next week because I have a real Scott Fishbowl draft to attend in New York City. And then Austin, 2 weeks from today, July 25th, we are finally getting into some redraft. We're going to do a month of redraft to help people prepare for their home leagues. It's been a great run with all these charity drafts. I'm glad we were able to cap it off. I love that our longest show of the season is the one where it's just me and you. We didn't even have a guest. It's just me and you chatting back and forth. It feels like the DFS days. Austin, let everybody know what you're working on, where they can find you, all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, you can catch me on Twitter and Instagram at Austin_FFL. Most importantly, you can catch us on Discord. If you come join our Discord community, you can talk to us about your Scott Fishbowl draft as it's happening. We'll give you feedback.
We're doing it right now.
Yeah, we'll just chat about what's going on. You can talk about the wild things that happen in your draft. Also, if you're in those best ball streets, you can talk to us about your best ball strategy, see what drafts teams we've been drafting, how we're thinking about that. It's really fun. It's been taking off more lately. We've been much more chatty in it recently. So come join that Discord community.
Yeah. One of the things I encouraged was the club fantasy team, who does a ton of best ball drafts between me, you, Chris Molina, Joel Worth, to just start posting your stuff in the public Discord so that everybody could talk about it and not just us talking about it by ourselves in the background. I feel like that's really taken off lately, and we're talking a lot more about strategy and build. So it's been very fun. It's completely free. If you guys are looking to join that, please do so. It's the link in the description of this video. And as I typically mention, it's where the first invite for these mock drafts go out. And we're about to start getting into very heavy redraft season. It's going to be hard to get into these drafts. So you're definitely going to want to get into our Discord. And I've been a terrible host this entire show. Like, subscribe, do all the things that you're supposed to do. But hopefully you guys had a ton of fun. I know I had fun. Thank you to everybody who drafted with us. Thank you to the chat, especially, Jamie, Lewis, Jonathan. You guys have been in there the entire time, keeping this thing lively. And we appreciate every single one of you guys. We appreciate the drafters. And like I said, we're going to take next week off. Well, I'll be in New York City with all these folks. I'll make sure I get these guys the link to the Discord. Everybody in the chat's looking for it now, so you love to see that. And again, this is going to be the last one for 2 weeks. We'll be on to redraft season. For Austin, I'm Ryan. You can follow Club Fantasy on all the socials at Club Fantasy FFL. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. We'll see you at the next mock draft.